Does God care about the little things?
I think God cares about everything.
Okay.
Yes. Short answer, yes.
Any?
And I think something that's little to one person can be very big to somebody else. That's why I think he cares about everything.
So it's interesting. I'll share with you a little story. So there's a story that was told of Vilna Gaon's wife made a pact with a friend, and she said, whichever one of us passes away first is going to come back to the other one in a dream and tell them what happens in the next world. So her friend passed away first, and she came back to her in the dream, and she said, really, I'm not allowed to tell you what happened in the next world. But because we made a pact, I'll share with you one little story. It says, remember when we used to go collecting together, right? The Vilna Gaon's wife and her friend used to go collecting for charity many times together. And she said, do you remember that one time that we were collecting for charity and we saw a philanthropist across the road, and I pointed and I said, look, she's there, let's go across the road to her. She says, even for that moment where I pointed my finger and said, look, there's someone who might potentially give to us, and points us across the road, even for that, I'm going to get rewarded, right? For that little act of pointing and saying, look, there's someone there across the road, which I think backs up what all of you were saying around the table, was that, yes, God cares about the little things. What we're going to look into it in this class together is why. Why do the little things matter? Why does God care about the little things? So does anyone want to read the Mishnah?
And flee from sin, for a mitzvah leads to another mitzvah, and a sin leads to another sin. Since the consequence of a mitzvah is a mitzvah, and the consequence of a sin is a sin. He used to say, do not be scornful of any person, and do not discount anything, for there is no person without his hour, and no thing without its place.
It's translated, I think, as minor because that's, in our minds, we probably think of it as minor.
It's not that important. It's not as important as the major mitzvahs.
Right. And we might have different, different definitions. Like some people might think, oh, that's a minor mitzvah, but there are mitzvahs, I think, in our own mind that we probably think, oh, those are the big ones, those are the important ones, you've got to keep them, right? Whether it's, Shabbos or kosher or whatever, those are the ones that you define in your own mind. And there are the others that are like, these are the minor ones, these are the light ones, right? Like, we don't attach so much weight to them. So the Mishnah is coming to tell us that, no, be as careful, run to perform a minor mitzvah, right? Attach an importance to it. And anything that comes to mind.
Are there really minor mitzvahs, or is that a subjective thing? So in other words, have the rabbis determined, or does the Torah determine that there's really something that you have to do that's major, and then some of the other ones are not so important? Or is that something that people kind of choose for themselves?
So that's a great question, and the answer to that is that the Torah does not tell us, right? It doesn't say these are the big ones, these are the ones you have to do, and we're actually told that we're not told in the Torah like the consequences, right? It doesn't say if you do this mitzvah, this is the reward you're going to get. If you do this avera, this is the punishment. Very rarely, occasionally it will, but for the most part, it doesn't give us that information. Why? Specifically for this reason, because Hashem doesn't want us to kind of think, oh, these are the big mitzvahs, these are the ones that I've got to keep, and these are the ones that I don't have to keep, right? So, and I think it comes down to in our individual lives, we all have mitzvahs that we kind of gravitate towards and mitzvahs that we struggle with, right? And it could be based on our upbringing, right? Like if someone grows up keeping Shabbat, then it's probably, not necessarily, but possibly it's easier for them to keep doing it than it is for someone who doesn't grow up with it. And some of it is our personality. If someone, personality struggles with telling the truth, then they're going to struggle with the mitzvah of don't tell, keep away from falsehoods, as opposed to someone who, grows up like some some people are just like, I see this with some kids, right? Like some kids, they would never think to tell a lie, right? So there are different mitzvahs that we struggle with or find easier based on our upbringing, our personality, or numerous other things. Any other thoughts about this Mishnah before we delve into it? Okay, so I want to share with you, when I was putting this together, I was thinking about, someone asked the question of, that she looks at other people and she's like, this person is doing such good things, right? Right? Whereas she feels like for herself, she's got a much smaller part. And now the analogy that I'd like to bring is, like when you're in school or right, and they have these performances. Now, all the kids, oftentimes the kids want the big parts, and there can be a disappointment if you get like a small part. So I guess what she was kind of feeling is that other people seem to be playing much bigger in the world, right? They're accomplishing much more than, let's say, what she's accomplishing. Firstly, is that anything that anyone can ever relate to, right? Yes, nods around the table, definitely, right? You look at other people and you're like, wow, this person is accomplishing so much, right? Is doing so much, whereas, what am I doing? Is there any truth to it?
Well, there's a saying that says there's no small parts, there's only small actors.
I like that saying. Okay, and based on what this Mishnah is saying, what does that kind of teach us? I mean, if you think about it, right, like it's saying run to perform a minor mitzvah, right? What is it teaching us about these minor mitzvahs? What does it teach us about minor mitzvahs if we're being told to run to perform them?
But there isn't a minor mitzvah. Right. Every mitzvah is a mitzvah.
Right.
Why do the little mitzvahs matter? Debbie gave us a very good point that we don't actually know which ones are the minor ones and which ones are the major ones. But why do they matter?
Just it may be minor to us, but calling or visiting somebody sick, housebound, it's huge to them for you to go visit. And it's just 15 minutes out of your day to make the call or go visit. So it may be minor to us, but it's huge to the person you just visited who is housebound or in the hospital.
Yep, and it's interesting. It's that, and I put it down here as like it might be a small mitzvah, a minor mitzvah, but it has a big impact. That's right. And sometimes even the big impact can be on you, right? You decide. My son shared a story with us and there's a few different permutations of the stories. There's a law in Judaism which, when you put your shoes on, you're supposed to put your right shoe on, then your left shoe, tie the left shoe, then tie the right shoe. Which I think I'm going to go out on a limb here and say most of us would assume that's a minor mitzvah, right? Now, there's a story told that there was a Jew who was assimilated, and his teacher taught him this law, and he said to him, look, I know we're about to part ways. I'm asking you just to keep this mitzvah. Right, that's it. Don't do anything else, just keep this mitzvah. And this Jew goes on his way and he lives his life completely assimilated, nothing to do with Judaism. But his previous teacher had asked him to do this, so he kept it. And he's tying his shoes every he's putting his shoes on every single day like that. First the right shoe, then the left shoe, And one day he's with someone and the person asks him and says, why are you doing that? Just put your shoes on like a normal person, right? Why are you doing this thing? And he explains, and he has this moment where he kind of thinks to himself, you know what? For years and years I've been putting my shoes on because Judaism prescribes it this way, and I know nothing about Judaism, right? Let me go in and learn more about Judaism. And I don't know if anyone here around the table has a story like that, but sometimes we take on a small act, we do a small act, and it has a big impact, whether it's on other people or whether it's on ourselves. We do something small, and it has a big impact. Someone else was telling me that recently they started this practice of hisbodedut. What does hisbodedut mean? It's a practice of going silently and talking to God, right? Informal prayer, talking to God. And they said that has made a huge impact. That's the way they start their day off, and it changed their day. Now again, but it has a big impact, and that's kind of why one of the reasons why the Mishnah is telling us that run to perform a minor mitzvah, because we might think it's a minor mitzvah, but we don't actually know what the impact is going to be on other people or on ourselves. Yes.
Yeah, I was born into a secular Jewish home, and it was like one of those remodel the house projects where you do this one little thing and you think, yeah, I did that, that looks good, but now this.
Good, yes, exactly. Well said.
I never intended really
To renovate your whole house.
There's a children's book, I don't know if you're referring to it, about, a woman who gets a new doormat, right? And she says, oh, this doormat is so lovely, but now I need, new flooring to go underneath it, right? Yeah. The flooring is great, now I need to paint the walls, right? And the paint is great, but now I need to get a new dining room table, right? And it's kind of that thing. And it can be a small little act that we sort of take on, but then it sparks something more.
Well,
yeah.
I was going to say, instead of, you said minor mitzvah can also be light mitzvah. I'm going to say it can also be easy mitzvah. The easy ones. So if you say you're going to take on Shabbos and you've never taken on Shabbos, that's huge, okay? But tying your shoes, that's an easy mitzvah. It's just something you have to remember every day. And that's where you can get sucked into doing another easy mitzvah, and another easy mitzvah, and another easy mitzvah.
Yeah, beautiful. And I think also when it comes to ones that are part of our daily habit, right? For example, there's morning blessings or whatever, right? Now, if someone's in the habit of doing it, it's very easy to do because it takes a couple of minutes. It doesn't entail a change of lifestyle. And the Mishnah enjoins us and says, run to perform a mitzvah like that. It's teaching us, do it with enthusiasm. Right now, the morning blessings, I don't know if anyone's, we did a series on them. But what they do is they go through so many of the things that we have in our life anyway, and so often don't appreciate, right? The fact that we have shoes, and the fact that we can stand up straight, and the things that are in there. And if we can infuse those easier, right? Those lighter mitzvahs, the ones that don't impose so much of a change on our life with enthusiasm. It changes our day, right? It brings so much more gratitude into our life, and it brings so much more mindfulness about the blessings that we do have, even when we all have things that we want or desire more of. So this idea of bringing enthusiasm to the light mitzvahs, the easier mitzvahs, teaches us that when you put enthusiasm into those things that we already do, right? And I'm sure it doesn't matter where you are religiously, everyone is doing a mitzvah, right? Everyone is doing a mitzvah because there's so many of them, right? When we can put enthusiasm into those mitzvahs that we're already doing, it changes the way we do those mitzvahs, and that on itself has a big impact on us. And the third reason why little things matter is because it creates habits. Right? And habits create who we are. James Clear says this: become a person not who's goal-oriented, but who's habit-oriented. Why? Because when you're working towards a goal, once you've reached that goal, that's it, right? What do you do next? You have to get a next goal. When you focus on your habits, that our habits really make up who we are. So three reasons that we shared why the little things matter, aside from the fact that we don't know which ones are minor and which ones are major, is number one, those are the ones that often create the habits, and the habits create who we are as people. It could be a small decision, but it can have a big impact, whether it's on us or on other people. And when we put the enthusiasm into those daily rituals, then that in itself can have a lot of a bigger impact on us, right? Like, as opposed to if we were just going to do it, well, it's a little thing, who cares about it anyway? This is a little thing, but I'm going to put enthusiasm into it, and then it has a bigger impact on us. Any thoughts or comments? Okay, now let's go to the flip side of it. What's the danger of a little bad thing, right? Something, it says flee from sin. It doesn't use the same kind of language, but still, like, what's the danger of doing something just a little bit bad, a little bit wrong?
It can become a habit.
You do one little thing and it leads to other things, because what it says, what it say here? It says a mitzvah leads to another mitzvah and a sin leads to another sin. Since the consequence of a mitzvah is a mitzvah and the consequence of a sin is a sin. There's two ways where that happens. Number one is naturally, right? Take a simple example. You decide to snooze the alarm clock, right? The next morning it becomes much easier to snooze the alarm clock again, right? If you choose not to, it becomes easier to get out of bed right away, right? Whatever we do, it becomes easier the next time to do that thing. And the other thing is, we're told that supernaturally Hashem is going to give us another mitzvah to do, right? You do a good deed and God will give you an opportunity to do another good deed. You do a bad thing and God's going to give you an opportunity to do another bad thing. There's an interesting medrash that's told. Does anyone here familiar with the song Shalom Aleichem that we sing on Friday night? So we sing Shalom Aleichem, which is welcoming the angels, right? Who are these angels? So every Friday night, the angels come to the house and they look at the house, and if the house is ready for Shabbat, they bless it, and there's a good angel and there's a bad angel. The Medrash says it should be this way next week, and the bad angel has to respond and say Amen. And similarly, if the house is not ready for Shabbat, the bad angel gives a blessing, which is really a curse, that this is the way it should be next week. And the good angel is forced to respond Amen to that. And the idea here, what this Medrash is kind of teaching us, is that we, in some ways, create our own destiny, right? When we make the house ready for Shabbat, we're setting it up so that next week it becomes easier to do that. Doesn't mean there's not going to be blips in the system, right? Times where we struggle a little bit more or whatever. But generally, if we do a good thing or we do a bad thing, we're setting ourselves up for the future to do either more good things or more bad things. And that's why the language here is that you have to flee from bad things, because it's not just this bad thing that's at risk here, but it's also the consequence of it and how it makes it easier for us to do bad things in the future, and harder for us to do the right thing in the future. To borrow Ilana's example, if you don't give the change back, it becomes much harder the next time not to give the change back, because you're like, I kept it. Like, why should I change what I did? And if you do, it becomes easier to do it the next time. Any thoughts? Any questions on that?
I know this is really extreme, but
yes,
if you look at gang activity in the inner cities, they start with the kids young, selling dope in the corners, a little sin. And then they get bigger, beat somebody up. And then in order to be installed in the gang, you have to kill someone. I mean, this is exaggerated. Well, maybe not, but I don't know gangs so well.
I think it gives us a beautiful insight into human nature, right? Because most of the time, and again, I'm not I'm not an expert on, but a lot of times, if you would tell someone right straight out, oh, you have to kill someone to be part of it, they would say, no, I'm not doing that. But if you tell them you just have to
steal the candy from the,
it's not that big a deal to kind of do it, right? It costs like 25 cents or whatever it is. And then you lose sensitivity and that leads down that slippery slope, which is what this mission is talking about. The consequence of a mitzvah is another mitzvah, an opportunity to do good. And the consequence of a bad thing is that it becomes easier for us to do bad things. And it's something for us to bear in mind when we're making decisions, is that it's not just about this little thing right now, but it's about how this is going to play out in my life going forward. Any thoughts, any questions? Okay, so we're going to move on to the next Mishnah. What does it mean that every person has their hour? He says, do not be scornful of any person, do not discount anything, for there is no person without his hour and no thing without its place. What does that mean? The consequence of this concept that there's no person without an hour is that we have to show respect to every person. What does it mean that there's no person without an hour? It means that the fact that you're here right now in this time period is by design. It's not like, oh, God had to create the world and put billions of people in it and therefore there's so many people in it. It's by design, right? Just like in Judaism, time has energy, right? And like there's a mitzvah of Shabbat which comes around on Shabbos, and there's a mitzvah of praying in the morning that's in the morning, and the one in the afternoon, right? And like there's different time, energy to time, and purpose, and a mission for the time. So too, every person is put into this world at a specific time by design, right? So what is it when we can live with this belief, right? When we can internalize this belief, what does that mean? When we realize that the fact that there's someone else in the world right now means that God has a purpose for them right now. How does that change things?
It makes every person special.
It makes everyone special, makes us, and I think that goes back to what Beth Ann said, it hopefully helps us treat them with more respect.
Then you don't believe the world is random. Becomes more meaningful.
I'll share with you a story of, I think, someone who lived with this belief. There was a rabbi who worked at a warehouse, and every morning when he walked in and he walked out, there was a security guard, and he would make sure to say good morning and good evening at the end of the day. Now one day the security guard is locking up and he's about to leave, and he says, hold on a second, something's not quite right. And they say to them, what do you mean? And he says, because that rabbi who came in, he said good morning to me this morning, but I don't remember him saying good evening on the way out. This is a big warehouse, and like there were lots of people coming and going. And they said, oh, maybe you just missed him going. And he says, no. He says, I'm sure I would have seen this person. I'm sure I would have remembered if this person left, because he always made sure to say good evening at the end of the day to me. So he insisted, the security guard insisted that let's do a sweep of the building and make sure he's okay. And they did a sweep of the building, and they couldn't find him anywhere. And the security guard is like, maybe I missed him, maybe he said good evening and I was busy, whatever. And he's like, no. I'm pretty sure I would have remembered had he said good evening to me. And what he does is he does a sweep of the building again, and he sees that there's some freezers, like these big commercial freezers, and he opens up one of the freezers, and the rabbi was stuck inside that freezer. He had got caught inside the freezer. The story happened before the days where they had the safety thing that allows them to open from the inside. His life was saved because of that, right? The security guard not done the sweep, what would have happened is he would have stuck there overnight and frozen to death. Now, again, what this shows us, by the way, is two things, right? It shows us that the rabbi obviously understood that every person has value, right? The fact that they're in this world means that God has determined they need to be in this world. And that's why he treated the other person with the respect of saying good morning and good evening. Mm-hmm. And by the way, the fact that the security guard knew that shows that most other people weren't doing it, right? Because if everyone was saying it, good morning, good evening, it wouldn't have stood out to him. And it also shows us how his small act of saying good morning and good evening ended up saving his life, right? So that small act had a big impact. Again, run after those minor mitzvahs, because you never know what's going to happen. And the mission, kind of what is teaching us here, is that when we insult other people, or when we don't give other people the worthiness that they deserve, what we're really doing, and even though we don't realize what we're doing, but subconsciously what we're really doing is insulting God. Because the mission is teaching us that there's a world by design, and every person, everything has a place in that world. And if I don't give this person the respect, I'm kind of showing that, like, I don't believe that that God has a purpose for this person. Now, obviously, it doesn't mean that we have to put up with things from other people that are damaging or whatever, right? But it's teaching us to give other people the worthiness that they deserve, because God created the world in a way that every person is valuable and important in the world. And guess what? It also applies to ourselves. right? Sometimes the way we talk to ourselves, or like, we'll say, oh, I'm so stupid, or, like, what does it matter, or whatever, right? But the way we talk to ourselves, when we recognize that every person and everything has a purpose and a specific reason why it's in the world right now, we should speak to ourselves with that kindness and respect that we deserve. Any thoughts, any questions? More on this concept that everything, do not discount everything, right? Then there's no thing without its place. King David was brilliant. And there were 3 things that he couldn't understand why God created. He couldn't understand why God created insanity. He couldn't understand why God created fleas. And he couldn't understand why God created spiders, right? He thought to himself, right? These 3 things just seem to create havoc. Right? They're just a nuisance, right? What's the productive purpose of it? Now, it was interesting that later on in his life, he had 3 incidents which each one explained to him what that there was a use to it. And I'll share with you those 3 incidents, right? So once, the story of his life was that Shaul, who was the king, he was going to become the next king, and Shaul was the king at the time. Now really it should have gone on to Shaul's children, but because Shaul sinned with Amalek, which is another story, he lost that. Now it was a source of contention to Shaul that he wasn't going to have it, and he kept trying to kill King David because he thought that King David was trying to take the kingship from him. Again, it's a bit of a much more of a complicated story, but I'm just giving you the background so that you can understand it. So what King David had to spend much of his life running away and hiding from King Shaul. Now once he was running away and hiding, and King Shaul came close to finding him, and he was asked around, is David in this village? And what King David did is he pretended to be crazy, and King Shaul looked at this crazy person and thought, this can't be King David, right? Because this person's acting completely crazy. It showed him, King David, that King David had doubted that there's a purpose to what God created this thing, and yet it came and it saved his own life. Now obviously we're not saying that that's the only reason it was created. What we're showing is that King David, who understood so much about how Hashem created the world and about God's running of the world, even he who had the questions came to a point where he was like, oh, now I see how every single thing that Hashem created.
It's like a spider web.
And one of King Shaul's guards were guarding the cave, and he was stuck there. And what happened is that a mosquito came and stung him, so he moved, and that's how he was able to escape from it, right? Like 3 little incidents, again, which showed King David that don't doubt, right, that every single thing that Hashem created for a purpose. Do we understand what that purpose is? Not necessarily, right? Most of the time we're not going to understand what that purpose is. But it's important for us to kind of know that. So to kind of sum up what we discussed today, is we discussed the idea that there's, be as careful with a small mitzvah as with any other mitzvah. Number 1, we don't know which ones are minor ones and which ones we don't. Number 2, these are the ones that create our habits, and our habits are create who we are. And it's also, we can think it's a minor mitzvah, but it can have a big impact, whether it's on ourselves or whether on other people. And it also, if we can infuse that enthusiasm into those daily mitzvahs or the minor mitzvahs, it has a bigger impact on us than if we're going to just do it without thinking about it. And the consequences of doing, whether it's good things or bad things, is that we have opportunities to do either more good things or more bad things. So therefore we have to choose what we're doing carefully, so that we're setting ourselves up to continue to do more good things. So I'm throwing out a question you can answer or think about it as you wish, is one small thing we can all do this week. It can be different.
So
every single person is really important. I went to a lecture a few years ago with a man who had been burned over 70% of his body when he was a child. And he was in this burn ward in the hospital. And the doctor came in and he told the janitorial staff, each one of you is the most important person to this little boy. You will determine whether he lives or dies by the way that you clean his room, because he cannot get an infection The kid lived and he grew up and he is now a public speaker, but he has kept in touch with some of the janitorial staff. They saved his life.